my honor and privilege to welcome Dr. Rupamanjari Ghosh, the Vice-Chancellor of Shiv Nadar University, Uttar Pradesh, and her areas of interest include experimental and theoretical quantum optics, laser physics, nonlinear optics, quantum information, quantum measurement, and magneto optics. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh, for joining us today. Your profile is absolutely incredible, and it's amazing having someone from like a pure science background on here with us today, and in such an important position too, running a university. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vasudha, for having me here. It's a pleasure.
So without much ado, I would like to start by asking you, how have the last 18 months been for you, both professionally and personally?
In one word, it was challenging, right? Everything around us changed in a way we have never seen before. Particularly in the second wave, the pain of humanity touched us very badly. I mean, it was difficult. So, of course, we took care of things personally, institutionally. I would say Shiv Nadar University did reasonably very well. It was one of the first to start completely online education. We did not lose a single day, honestly. So we learned a lot of lessons during this period. The one challenging and the second word that comes to my mind is collaboration. You'd be surprised. I mean, this pandemic brought out the worst and the best in people. I've seen the worst. I've seen actually the beautiful side of human beings. What made us go ahead was the collaboration, institutional level, personal level, and of course, nationally as well. Particularly from the university perspective, this is one pandemic that hit everybody the same way. It didn't distinguish whether you are a rich country, a poor country, whatever state you are in, it hit us all. So we learned from each other a lot. And I think what it taught us was to think big. In the face of adversity of this kind, normally people don't talk like that, but I felt thinking big, staying agile, and not being averse to risks. These are nothing new. It's kind of old wine in a new bottle. These are things that we have been practicing before the pandemic. Same things came handy during the pandemic. And now when I see maybe the third wave is not coming the way we thought it would. Even now, it's the same principles that, keep us going. So I think those who are doing well in terms of pedagogy and engagement, the digital mode exposed the weaknesses. If you have been doing well, then digital mode enhanced that. If you have not been doing well, whatever well that is I'm talking about, then the digital mode exposed that. It also brought back, of course, the ground reality of a digital divide, which again in Shiv Nadar University, I'm very proud to say, we try to address in a limited way. Our students didn't suffer because they did not have connections home, no internet. We kept those people in our hostels, provided all facilities, and literally took care of all our people to the best extent that we could. I myself was down with COVID this year. It was touch and go. The community came in really handy. So you need to look after each other, still think big, and be a little ahead of everything. So uncertainty is ambiguity become part of your vocabulary. It has always been. The future of work is the debate. It's an old debate. Machines were taking over. Education 4.0 came after Industry 4.0. And that basically talked about if machines are taking over, what is the purpose of higher educational institutions, right? So the things that humans used to do, the things that you prepare your students for, now machines are capable of doing them. So what is higher education good for? So all of these challenges were there already. So some processes got hastened and we became better prepared overnight. And I think thinking big, staying ahead of the curve, staying really agile, thinking on our feet, and open to taking risks. I mean, it's not gambling, it's calculated risk. That really helped. And that challenge, those who have survived these challenging times have come out better. That applies to my students, that applies to my faculty, that applies to my institution as well.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. These have been incredibly challenging times. And it's interesting you mentioned the workforce of the future and, what is the point of higher education institutes. Those are definitely topics that have come up. I mean, Dr. Batra is joining us in today, and he actually loves to ask a question about university in the cloud. I think I will allow him to ask that question to you too once he joins. All right.
We seem to have lost him. Yeah.
Yes, that's all right. We can continue. But that is a topic that's come up a lot because there's so many EdTech companies coming up that are also offering courses, and then there are companies who are also accepting those courses as legitimate to give students their jobs. So I mean, we're coming into this quickly, but I would like to ask, what do you think about the rise of EdTech over the last 18 months, 2 years during the pandemic?
It was to happen, but I may be a little old-fashioned or maybe wiser. I believe that the pedagogy should dictate the choice of technology and not the other way around. It should not be that certain technology is available, therefore you use it irrespective of what was the mission of your institution.
Yeah.
What exactly do you try to achieve? So I think EdTech companies are doing very well. They're coming around to understanding the need. With the initial confusion, I've been very stubborn about it. I would not compromise on the quality of the education that I think is our hallmark. If that is the case, then the gimmick technology doesn't impress me. That takes you only up to a certain point. So definitely you should be technology savvy. You should be the master of the technology. You should not be the slave of technology. If the slavery becomes a hallmark of our EdTech, then that I find problematic. But the reach of technology is tremendous, right? We are also using it. We are already enabled, but we are also using it. Online education has some, advantages. I don't have to talk about it. If you look at the NEP, it talks about it in great details. So there are advantages. It would be stupid of us not to make use of that advantage. But at the same time, we should not forget about what this was all about. Because one thing for sure is that technologies will come and go, right? I mean, what is on top of the chart today, in less than a year, it would be the bottom of the chart. That's the way things are going. So you cannot bank on something that's changing so fast. So we have to sort of ask ourselves, what is it that the skill that we want to impart on our students? It's not learning one particular technology and be really excellent in that, because you won't last for long. That won't take you far. So the critical things that we impart in our students, actually, honestly, they stay the same. It's the skill of critical thinking. It's the skill of creative problem solving. It's the skill of communication. And then, of course, technology is in the background of all of this. You need to use technology. You need to know what is going on, but not become a slave of that. You need to be able to think quickly. If the context changes, you should be able to handle those kind of problems and solve those kind of problems when everything else, this ambiguity is our life right now, right? So you have to be ready to expect the unexpected. And so I think in that, the human brain is ahead of machines. And in some, big data has not taken over the way we thought it would. And then I can't say this about decision making so clearly, but the brain has the left part and the right part. The left part can be coded very easily. It's very logical. It works on algorithms. So the right part, the visual and intuitive part, cannot code. Nobody has been able to code this part. So if you have an education that combines the powers of these two parts, very logical, algorithmic, capabilities with visual and intuitive capability. That is, go through a project-based learning. can't beat it. So EdTech has to tune to this. Educationists have to take the lead. Educationists have to not just play catch up with technology, but really take the lead and take the leap. So I hope I have answered your question.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. I'm joining remotely.
I can see that. So nice to see you after long
time, and congratulations on building the SNU, Shiv Nadar University, into a university of choice, being a parent of teenagers and having friends who have teenagers. I know the respect, if I may use the term, that you've been able to create for what you created in the university. Tremendous. I can tell you, and I have no problem saying that I get requests, and if you know her, can you introduce her? So on and so forth. But let me build on what Vasudha asked. You rightly said that the skills that students remain the same, about curiosity, creative skills, about on-campus learning. Tell me one thing that has changed in terms of how you as an educator are approaching the process of educating your students. What has changed?
We have become much more individualistic. Even so, it's like this. When technology allowed us to do mass education, we all became copy of each other, right? Because there's no individualization of anything. Now the emphasis has been on knowing your students, right? And I think it's so important. We have been doing it in SNU, you know that, last 10 years, to know who are we teaching. Because I think it's extremely important to use technology now and other means that we have now. If you don't have technology, do it manually. To know the students, because India has these many layers, and I'm talking about our country only. And the kind of 17th century layer coexisting with 21st century, I don't think you see it in any other country. And I think that should not be looked down upon as a negative part of India. I think this is a very positive one. The diversity we have, the kind of raw material we get, not corrupted, uncorrupted raw material. And I think I cannot just focus my entire education only on the millennials. I have to look at India as a whole. And I think there are treasures really here and there, and there's a lot of work to be done even in this. So I think this consciousness of knowing your own students, knowing their background, and how to bring out the 360 abilities of your students. I don't, as a teacher, earlier, we all wanted to prepare clones of ourselves. Right now, that's the first thing they say, no. Your students are your students. They would be them. And they should not be clones of you, because then the diversity dies out. And then the higher education will not progress. I think one realization of this kind, in my mind, is the biggest. But there are, of course, several others. But I think you got my point.
Absolutely. To you, it's a brave new world with new opportunities, and hence students have to be looked at as exploring new ideas as per their own orientation and one-to-one learning, possibly. You use the word better knowledge of my students.
Yes.
Now let me talk about two more trends that both as a parent and as somebody in the society and somebody who helps the education editorial platform thinks. There's this word called the hybrid, blended. Now, is it here to stay? Or in my view, right now we have less choices, hence we are doing this. Because on-campus education is not going anywhere. Not only the teachers want it, the students ask for it. I'm on the board of my alma mater, Management Development Institute. And, I know that the students of this batch wanted to be on the campus much earlier than they've been allowed on the campus. So what do you think about this word hybrid and blended?
Yeah.
Do you think in the future there will be a university that will be entirely on the cloud? I know the Shiv Nadar University is a beautiful campus. I've had the good pleasure of visiting it, and infrastructure and campus are important. But do you think a university on the cloud can exist?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I'll address it in maybe two ways. One is that what the last 18 months have taught us very clearly. I mean, I knew it all along, like you were saying. You know it. Students love to be, the education is not about getting a degree certificate, not about a certificate. It's the engagement, 24/7 engagement on the campus, social interactions, everything, these things matter. But I think what we have learned is that there are two kinds of students. The regular students of this university going kind are the ones that would crave for the physical campus. Then there are other students who may be professionals or who may be the unfortunate ones who never had access to education without gap for many reasons, social or economic or both. For women, it's different. For them, they're not so fussy because for them, temporary skilling, because I already said these skills don't stay for long. Temporary skilling is really a dream. And I think online can help them even for an online MBA of the kind we are offering. For professionals who are already there in the market, they need to upskill themselves all the time. So lifelong learning, professional development, all these two areas, I see a lot of work on online plus some physical, so hybrid. And in the regular mode, what we call regular, in the regular university like Shiv Nadar University, I think that 70% of courses can still be taught online. I'm not saying we'll do it, but I'm saying 70% still in principle can be done online. 30%, my God, you can't. Even COVID research, we don't have AI, VR of that kind to do those kind of research in a remote manner. We are heavily involved in some of these kind of research. The training in your life sciences lab or your chemistry lab or in some mechanical engineering, it's still, or design, for example, which is a very, very big thing right now. Some of the design, actually, you can do very well in the 3D platform. We also got the SIR to do that, but it still needs a team to work together. And the kind of resources a campus offers of working together is very different from remotely working, and particularly for this age group, it's not very suitable. So I think physical campuses ought to stay for this kind of, this group of students. But the second thing is that I do think that technology has some advantages. In a big class, if you have to educate a large number, the lecture part, repeating it the same way again and again and again to different sections, means complete loss of, energy, everything. But tutorials, on the other hand, I mean, I'm using old-fashioned terms, but you know what I'm talking about, should be much more directed. Not more than 15 students in a class. That can be done in a different way. So I think we should be smart enough, we are getting there, to optimize the use of technology, not compromise on the standards that physical interactions bring in, and then also have the lifelong option. Because gone are the days, my time, where with a physics PhD, you have a career of 30 years. It doesn't work anymore. I mean, your career would be truncated if you do not keep updating yourself. Our time, we updated. I mean, I'm learning every day. We updated, but that's not about the majority. Majority did not have the opportunity to update their knowledge the way they should have. Now we are providing that. So I think lifelong learning would not be just a fancy thing. It's a requirement. And so therefore, most part of it I see would be online. So I think in some way, brick and portal model, I say, the brick and portal model is here to stay. And I think we should optimize and take the best of the both worlds.
My last question before I bring in Vasudha again. Vasudha studied abroad, studied in India. Many students, including my children, want to study abroad. But do you think post the pandemic, more and more Indian students will look at eminent universities which have possibly created a name for themselves, and the number of students that go abroad will come down, and the Indian university of your kind will benefit from that?
That's the hope. But, apart from just the education, I mean, I'm not putting it down. I'm coming back to that. A side comment first is that people also go abroad. I mean, I went for the experience of it, right? I mean, and some universities are known for certain areas. I mean, Vasudha read out this long list of my interests. And as a physicist, I went to a place which was number one in quantum optics, because I wanted to really do that. So I think the competition should be global. India should play a very big role in that. And our institutions really have to strive to be one of the best. One of the best in the world has a problem. You know that, I mean, as much as I do. The ranking and all have become really problematic because, everybody is judged by the same set of parameters.
Yeah, and I would say, just to support you, that the ratings that come from abroad are most suited to the strengths of their institution.
Absolutely.
They're not suited to the strengths of our institution.
Absolutely. So I think I floated a thing in one of their sessions to say that, these ratings really give the ranking back to the universities. It should be linked to my mission. My mission may be different from your mission, and you should be judged based on your mission, because I think if you forget the context of where I am located in Shiv Nadar University, then I think I'm not doing any service to anybody. So, even if you have a bowl full of rasgulla, they are all the same. It's no good. You need the heterogeneity, you need the diversity, you need universities with different missions, and particularly in a country like ours. So I think if the rating and ranking become more, honest and reliable, then I think that's the way to go. And I think it would help not the pandemic so much, but globally opening it up, allowing ourselves to compete would be good. Some people will still go out for the experience, but I think we should also be able to bring them back. We came back, our time, I had an idealism. There is an idealism that drove all of us in our generation. It has to be done. I think more and more that idealism should be combined with some practical advantages for us to do what we have done and for this to become a systematic change in this country. Because getting some experience from outside is not a bad idea. But that getting lost totally from India is a bad idea, because our higher education is highly subsidized. So you spend a lot of money educating somebody who gives all the output outside. So anyway, we lost Dr. Batra again, but
yeah,
I think I'm done.
I think that's right. No, but actually, I want to bring in another point, because it's not just about getting our own students back too, right? We also maybe want to have foreign students come in and have their experience in India, studying in India, have our, be able to provide that quality of service to them too. And is that something where I think Indian institutes are also trying to compete with global institutions for, right?
Well, the lifetime of a university is hundreds of years, right? So Shiv Nadar University is only 10-year-old. We are celebrating our 10th year. So whatever has happened in the last 10 years, 10, 11 years, is, has to yet pass the test of time. So you are right. And I see only a very few serious players in India. Not a whole lot. But I think unless the median goes up, you won't be able to sustain the very fragile peaks of excellence. I keep saying this. So the average has to go up. And I think we need a lot more players in this country, quality players, where excellence is what should be the driving word in this sector. Because this is a privileged sector. We are not, all higher education institutions are elite institutions, but should not be elitist. Because this is a privilege. We are not talking about primary education, which is a right. This one is a privilege. So I think without excellence, it has no meaning. So I think that's something that we need to enable, empower. It takes time. But of course, resources is critically missing, and that's something one has to look at, both financial and intellectual resources. And in the intellectual resources, more importantly, is leadership. That's in higher education very badly missing. So one or two examples, will not do for a country of our size.
Sure, those are fair points. But I do want to ask you, because you've been in this education sector for so long, and you've been a professor for several years, and you've worked with students, Indian students or foreign students, and now you're a Vice-Chancellor of a university yourself. Where do you think India's strength lies in the global market?
I think it's an oft-repeated phrase. Everybody talks about demographic dividend, right? So because this is India's strength, but it would become our biggest weakness, not a dividend, but a nightmare, if we cannot educate our youth in the way that's required. So I think if we are myopic in our vision about the higher education, which I unfortunately do see coming into the front pretty often, then this demographic dividend would become a real nightmare. So it can be looked both ways. Indians have done very well. Our education system produced quite a few, stalwarts in every area. You look at anything, the Indian names popping up, but there are exceptions. They're in spite of the system, not because of the system. I think India has to change that. It has to be because of the system.
Very cool. Yes, absolutely. I do want to change, stance a little bit here, because just because you have such an incredible career and a very scientific career, we don't always get someone with this particular background on our platform all the time. But can you please tell us a little bit about your own educational journey? I mean, you did mention how having a PhD nowadays is not a guarantee to a 30-year job in the same field. So maybe tell us a little bit about how your perception has also changed with the amount of time you spend.
Okay. In my life, fortunately, there's been continuity. I've been pretty fortunate. There's been continuity throughout. There is nothing that I really faced that was a big surprise, honestly. I come from Calcutta, good schooling and college there. I went to the US to do my PhD. As I was just mentioning, I was interested in quantum optics. But to be honest with you, if you have the time to listen to the story,
Absolutely.
Actually, I was interested in many things. My parents were of literature background. Our household was mostly social science, humanities kind. I'm the first science one in that. So there's music in the family and all kinds of things. So we sort of lived with all of that in the background. It was not so much for performance, but for our own, happiness. So I was interested in literature and all of that. But I understood pretty early in my school days that maybe I would be able to study history, study literature on my own, with a little help from here and there. But if I don't get into a regular curriculum with sciences, particularly in physics, it was so structured that I would be wasting all my life trying to break into the science world. So it was every discipline is kind of structured, but the structured sciences I understood was very rigid and very rigorous in some way. So I needed to get into that to understand physics. I was fascinated by natural things and the why and hows came. And so it sort of continued. I never changed that track. I kept on writing though. I was editor, even in Rochester, I was the editor of the magazine that came out of the Indian community at that time, where I did all kinds of things. But that passion for physics never changed. And so I used to do both theory and experiment. So it was good because now when you are in a leadership position, in my previous employment also in the central government, by the way, SNU is not my retirement posting. I'm still not retirement age. It was a destination. It was a choice to break out of the government system and after 25 years and start building this university. So I joined as an assistant professor below 30 and then climbed all the way to become the dean of the school. It was a new school, learned a lot from colleagues from other schools about the entire profession, their way of argument. It was those glorious days actually of my old university. And it came handy to go through the experience of a young researcher in this country when you start occupying the big chairs. When I'm sitting on the other side, when I'm in the chair of the selection committee, when I'm sitting in DST committees, I understand the pain of my young. I understand what they're going through. And I don't like to give no as an answer. If somebody asks something, I like to say yes and I find a way. And that strength and that understanding, I think, came from being through the steps myself and then figuring it out how we actually can improve the entire system. So like I said, it should be because of the system, not in spite of the system. In many ways, particularly a woman in physics, I came out in spite of the system. The system did not quite help. But I had excellent colleagues, excellent friends, excellent collaborators abroad also. I have French collaborators, they're my friends actually. It has been quite a journey. But all of that has helped when you get into the leadership role in showing the path and all of it. Science perception today is that it's a hard thing to do, right? And I think much of it is because you don't have the right kind of teachers. You remember when you are in primary days, the subject you like the most is where your teacher was. The teacher you liked the most was the subject that you chose to do. So it's sort of like that. But I think we make science very, we need to demystify science. And I'll end with one comment of mine that I have been saying of late, that now in the higher education scene, there's a lot of talk of what people say liberal studies, right? That's one side of the story. On the other hand, you have these disruptive technologies, very fancy stuff, AI, VR, ML.
Metaverse is the new
Nobody talks about sciences. But without sciences, none of these things would work. You look at any technological piece in front of you, the basis is very hardcore science. So I think we need to have a balance in our curriculum, in our wisdom, in some way talking to high school students to get them to take up, bright students should come to science, have the fancy things going, explore the world, because, we do not just need social media algorithms. The world, as your food and energy costs are rising. The pandemic has shown you the inadequacy of the healthcare system. This is all science. If you do not fund science, if you do not create scientists that can address these kind of problems, even your travel to space or travel on Earth, whatever it is, it needs, as a policy, getting into hardcore science. We need to make science demystified and accessible, because it's nothing but just logical thinking, and then some resources to be able to execute that. And I think that in SNU we are trying to create. Life sciences with AI and all is a very big thing. We are trying to do that. Physics has enormous possibilities. You really need to think of what are we doing to our world, right? We have only one planet Earth. And if it goes like that in the foreseeable future, that's the end of civilization as we know it. If universities do not wake up to the stark realities of where we are heading, who else will? So universities are your last dream places where through proper research, we can actually address these issues. And I feel panicky about this more than anything else, that I don't see people waking up to the reality that's facing our grandchildren. And I think that's something that universities should wake up and collectively address. You can't do that with fanciful stuff. It has to be hardcore.
Right, absolutely. You said a lot of things there, but I do want to kind of hone in on one part. You talked about that you came out of the system in spite of the system that was placed ahead of you. Can you tell us a little bit about those challenges that you faced? And then I'm going to come and cover the other comments that you made.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the funny sides and of course, depressing sides as well. Funny sides, particularly in the US. In Calcutta, I never felt anything. It was okay. We are all equal. System was what it was. But the moment I landed in the US, everybody started noticing that there is a woman in physics. It was funny. When I was about to finish my PhD, my work became quite famous afterwards. But when you are in it, you don't realize that much. But I had a post-deadline paper in a very famous conference in Baltimore. And I was the only one who was videotaped when I was speaking. And I wondered, when I talked to the people, they were from Maryland, And I wondered why they were videotaping me. Is my work that important, or it's a specimen from the zoo? It's a woman who has done some remarkable work. So this was funny actually, because you get noticed. My male colleagues in JNU may not come to work exactly at 9. Nobody would notice them. But if I'm there at 9:05, people will notice that today she's 5 minutes late. We had pretty good friends actually, and I was pampered a lot. For 18 odd years, I was the only woman in that physics department. And that's a central university. So I think it really, and then we hired, of course, I climbed up, we hired more women, but they were invisible. So I think part of the problem is that women somehow remain invisible. And even when, I would not talk about my own things, because as I said, I've been kind of fortunate. I had very good friends, I had very good mentors, but nobody would push for you really, because you miss the evening clubs. As a woman, your journey is a little different. Yeah. But I think what had happened later on in many selection committees, if you find that there's a woman candidate who has come, and I'm chairing, who has come, say, from Bombay for a position in Delhi, my selection committee members would start asking, what does your husband do? Is he moving with you? Yeah. And I was unable to stop that. So the next man that walked in, I asked, what does your wife do? Mm-hmm. Is she moving with you? And the guy, poor thing, was a little startled because, what kind of... But through the message, this was totally irrelevant. And I said in the end that what I asked was totally irrelevant. It had nothing to do with your interview. And I told my co-panelists, don't ask these questions. Let them figure out how they want to handle their family issues. The two of them. You have nothing to do with that. You are here to judge the candidates on their merit. If there are two CVs that are excellent, my colleagues would often talk about the guy, he's a genius. Really, really good. And for the girl, she's very hardworking. And if I ask why, I said, well, she worked under a very good advisor. That is true for the guy too. But, these are things that I see all the time. It's so ingrained. People don't mean it, actually. They don't mean it to really put you down. They don't realize that that's the framework that has been created around them. Women also do the same thing. It's not like men only do it. Yeah. Women also do it the same.
That's a whole system.
It's the whole entire system. So I think in some ways, it's also difficult, particularly, ladies' toilet. You can't travel if you don't have access to toilets. Indian men do, but women, it's a big problem. So everywhere I find basic things of childcare, infrastructures like toilet, security, because you have to work at night in the lab. These are concerns that women face more than men. And I think now slowly I see there is an understanding of it, but nothing much has happened actually on ground. Nothing much if you look at the entire country. So that's what I mean you also need to, sometimes it gets to be very lonely, right? In big meetings in the board, there are 25 people or 24 people. I'm the only woman. It's not nice, you have to again go out for dinner. Sometimes it's a very, very lone journey. So it has not really worked very well, but I think slowly people are talking about it and it's coming out. And it's not women's problems. That's where people go wrong. Every right-thinking individual, men or women, they have to be in it together. Because you can't fight it. I don't want men and women to be the opposite interest groups. Because the interest is the same. And I think this understanding has to come, and then everything else would be. Our system also had other problems that apply to both men and women. To do with your assessment, the way the syllabi were, the way it was taught, the way assessments were done. There is no scope for somebody who is a little different but extraordinary to be part of the system and excel. I was smart enough to do all my exams. I stood first in school and then do it quickly so that I have time to do my other things. That's hard.
Yeah.
School should be fun. I see that happening a little bit now with the children, but the excellence, the understanding of excellence is not there. Any peak of excellence you see, you flatten it down to the mediocre level. That's not what regulations are supposed to do. Regulations are supposed to encourage and enable excellence. So our job, in summary, is that to find excellent people. Once you find excellent people, I'm really emphasizing on that. Once you find excellent people, you enable them, give them freedom, empower them.
And that needs to start from a very early age.
Yes.
It's also interesting you talked about this sort of duality with this gender bias that we really see everywhere, where it's like, on one hand, yes, because you're a woman, you're questioned on things that are irrelevant. But on the other hand, it's also the thing that's to be the highlights, right? It's like, oh, a woman in physics as opposed to your actual work that you're doing. Or even a woman of color for that matter, because I can imagine States, that's also another parameter that's kind of just added to your identity. And that becomes a focal point. So it's almost like, it's the one thing that'll either stop you or it's the one thing that'll give you the highlight, and like your work, your studies, your achievements are always secondary to who you are.
Yeah. But it's okay. I mean, men also have many such things, but I think...
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure men of color also facing anyone with any kind of disability who does something.
Oh, yes.
Or your lower income backgrounds. Again, it's like, also, we love that tale of coming from the streets too.
Right. But in the higher education space, this is one line I use at SNU a lot as our way of doing, because anything, no two people are the same. So I don't talk about equality at all. I talk about equity. No two human beings should be equal. Why should I be equal to you? I should bring in diversity. You should think differently than me. And this is what enriches higher education. Every individual is unique, and that's our strength. We do not want two people to think or do things the same way. It's true of not just physical disability, a weak guy and a strong guy, whatever. Technology, the advantage is that it is making it a more level playing field. The way you can drive a truck or you can fly a fighter plane, because technology takes care of those physical extra elements. And ultimately, then it's this that matters. And that's the real asset of higher education. And thinking differently, not harmoniously, conflict of ideas is our strength. I think that should be remembered.
Is our strength. That is a really good quote to take. I also wanted to ask you, because you've had such a great scientific career, and you did mention that one misconception we have is that science is very hard, which absolutely I believe that too. But what are some other misconceptions that people seem to have about sciences?
Well, one thing that not just for science, but any serious academic career, you think of going all the way to the PhD. To see the number of years of investment that people get little scared of. You cross class 12, then college, then maybe a little short master's, and then PhD. And PhD is quite tough. It takes really long. So then only you think of a career, then in physics, chemistry, life sciences, then you go for postdoc and after doctorate, and then only you think of settling down with a permanent job somewhere. It's a very long investment. People get scared of that. But the flip side of it is that the scientific area gives you a lot of freedom. This is not like selling toothpaste, right? I mean, and earning a lot of money. Here, once you have arrived, and everybody eventually arrives, you have a lot of freedom to pursue the kind of things you wish to do. When you work in a system, of course, there are certain rules that you go by, but real autonomy is there. In your research, you're the master. You decide what you wish to do. When you are off teaching, you can actually take a break. And when you do well, you get invited all over the world, which happened to me. I did not spend a penny. Right? So I think there are many parts. You're like a hobby for which you are getting paid. And it's a very nice feeling because your brain is perpetually engaged. And I think death is the day I stopped using my brain. Right? So this is one career that makes you alive in the fullest way every day. So people look at the hardship, they don't look at what comes at the end of that hardship. And I think if we have more facilities coming, and if we have, it is not happening. I mean, hundreds and thousands of PhDs are produced. Most of the thesis is actually irrelevant, right? But only very few PhD thesis work from this country are of some real value. So if you can actually produce those mentors, the guides, who would guide our youngsters into the proper way and allow for that flexibility in the system, it will not be as bad as it looks. But I would not lie to you. It's always, when you are working on a problem which you do not know the solution of, right? It's always tense. I still get tense when I'm working on something, and for years you're working on something and it's tense. But then when you solve it, the pleasure and everything, the happiness is of a different kind altogether. And that's a scientist's life. And it's not the Einstein kind here, but, he was one of a kind. But, there is a whole lot of problem waiting for you to do. And you need to get into the structure because you may spend 50 years of your time doing something that somebody else has already done. So the structure of the scientific world is necessary. It's getting corrupted a bit, but still there is some ethics that we follow. We are kind of open to each other. Conferences, you talk about your unpublished work. So all kinds of things still happen, though it's getting a little mad in our push to publish and citation and ranking. This is, this is really going to a real extreme. But there is subjectivity in assessment that is by rule, it's not a mistake. I have to judge something that is not yet solved, right? Nobody knows the answer for. So I have to use my subjective judgment to say it's good or bad. And that's the way we have all done it. And there is no substitute for it. You have to take some leap. If something is not even bad, then it's not science at all. I mean, it's the famous statement. It can be good, but if it is not even bad, I mean, bad theory is also okay, but it has to be a theory. So science is challenging, but one can learn the trade. And the outcome is truly, truly satisfying. But we need more mentors in this country. We don't have enough professionals in this country.
It's clear that you know this domain really, really well. So now that you are in this position of being a Vice-Chancellor of Shiv Nadar University, how are you implementing these ideas or trying to realize these ideas so that, students these days can benefit from them?
Yeah, you should ask my people, actually, not me. And I'm very proud of my faculty, for example. Very, very proud. When we started 10 years back, I had written to a bunch of Indians who are settled abroad, say, I'm taking this plunge. You want to come back to the country, this is the time. And a dozen of them did. And most of them are still there. And we managed to create a culture, because that's very important. I don't mean the culture in a silly way. I mean deep scientific culture, temperament to address problems. But the way I do it, in the beginning when we started, it was an empty field, right? Mostly a top-down vision approach. There's a vision and you had to implement that. Then the field grew. So now there are people. So you have to match the top-down with bottom-up. Then only it works. And I think that alignment is something I do personally. Interview of every new faculty, because you have to concentrate only on the faculty. Your first problem is faculty. Second problem is faculty. Your third problem is faculty. If you get that piece right, everything else follows. So the academic credibility of every faculty, of course, is judged by the departments and the experts, outside experts also. Not every field I know. I mean, nobody can know everybody. But I still interview every faculty candidate for an hour. And that has nothing to do with checking their academic credibility, because that the experts will do. This is about alignment of purposes. If I'm going to hire somebody at Shiv Nadar University and the founder had a vision and we have actually made that happen, then the alignment happens to see if you are working for what is good for you, that should align with what is good for SNU. Then my job is done. Because you will be working what is good for you, and that would actually work out for SNU. So we actually take a lot of pain in the initial mapping to see your research interest, whether that falls into my mission, what exactly would you need to be successful in that. And that's my job as the Vice-Chancellor to make sure then you get, once I'm hiring you, I give you everything that you need to perform to the fullest. And that's the promise. And that's how it has come up. Initial days, you can do it kind of lavishly, semi-lavishly, because these are expensive areas. You have to build from labs to equipment to everything. Then people start performing well. They get their own grants. And you have to continuously help. And those who know should come forward in training the others. Then now in 10 years, some people have reached the top level also, those who started 10 years back. And now they would carry it forward. So it's like a chain, and excellence attracts excellence. If you do the first bit right, then you stay away from mediocrity. And it's important because, as I said, you can't cheat your students. Students come to higher education institutions, they should know what they're getting in return. And I think it's our contract with the students, social contract with the students and their parents, when they come, and what is it that the value addition that SNU will do. And that's the way it has worked. And so I have focused really on my faculty to be able to deliver what the vision and mission of the founder has been. And we have not deviated from there. Still the same mission, same vision that we started with. Of course, it was one man's vision. It has become our collective dream. And I like to live that dream. I lived it in my earlier institution as well. And in this one, it's a much more scope for doing so. So it's really a dream thing. And but you can see the results in your own lifetime.
Definitely. I mean, being with an education institute from almost the beginning and see it grow is a completely different experience and a completely different sort of outcome to see there, because you can say that this is directly your outcome as opposed to the whole. Also the institutions, of course. What I mean is that it's not just like decades-long history of that institution, but it's like decade-long work of your own. I also want to ask, because we're talking so much about 21st century skills these days, and how this whole teaching online has changed people's idea of what skills are the most important to impart. What do you think are the most important skills that we talk today?
In certain areas, India does need a skilled manpower. But those are all short term. I would not name it right now, but two, three that are coming up in big way. And it's also region specific. In Bihar, you need some, in UP, some. So I do see short-term goals of that kind. But I'll answer you in a different way, that a skilling that you can impart in 3 to 6 months, you don't need to come to the university for that. Universities train you for longer, for much bigger ones. It's like the difference between textbook, which doesn't change for 100 years, but a specialization that changes every 33 years. So you need skilling on some, and I think the government should have schemes to take people out of school, even class 8 pass out, class 9 pass out, class 10 and 11 and 12 at whatever stages, and skill them. There's a lot more, some are family oriented, even plumbing and all of those. I was reading some story in Odisha. So it's possible to give certification of that kind. So those are certificate courses of that kind. Part of it can be beautifully done online. And I mentioned that when Dr. Batra was asking me, 70% of most of these things can be done online very nicely. The final touch and final everything, the practice on ground, of course, has to be the last 30% or less. That needs physical face-to-face training. But I think India does need this, and every state should have a map of what they need and do it accordingly. That's not what higher education institutions should do. You can do it as a 3-month pastime, but higher education, you don't need to come for a degree in a higher education institution if the goal is that, because it would change very, very fast. The skills that you are training somebody for, a machine would be capable of doing that in the next 2 months. So what is the merit of doing that kind of skilling? But with our huge mass and large entropy, things are going to change very slowly in India. So still, for a couple of years, these short-term skillings would be extremely important, and we should do it. But we should have that's the myopic way of doing things. We should do. I'm not putting it down. But we must have that larger vision of how to use our youth to progress in the real way. And I mentioned the global issues because these are India's issues as well. And we need to solve those kind of problems for humanity.
Absolutely. It's not like one skill is going to fit everyone or forever for that matter.
Yes.
So it's always like, yes, skill yourself with what's going on, but also prepare it. And it's also like you said in the beginning itself that, be ready for expect the unexpected.
Yes.
So, I mean, in the interest of time, I will like to wrap this up and ask you my final question, which is, what do you think are the biggest lessons that you can take away from the pandemic?
Well, actually, as I have said already, it's not a new lesson for me, but basically, it showed us the merit of thinking big, staying agile, and faith in resilience of human beings. I was never averse to taking risks, calculated risks. So I think that's something that we did learn again through this. I talked about collaboration, and it showed us the merit of that. This vaccination, for example, is a well-quoted example. It couldn't have come up to this level if it had not been international collaboration. Even teaching methods, online ways of learning. I personally talked to our Harvard MBA dean to figure out what they're doing at Harvard. And it was so funny because in that meeting, whatever problems they were talking about, it was in March 2020. We had just started 1 week of online classes. Go slow. Don't try to have the same syllabus for online as you had for physical, and so on and so forth. It's exactly the same thing that they were talking about. So I think collaboration is something that we really understood the merit of. Gone are the days of going solo, and to claim that my university is the best in going solo. It's not. You have to be the driver of an ecosystem. As a university, you should be driving the ecosystem of partnership around you. And you should be the quality controller of that, because I think universities are the best quality controllers. Should sort of be given back to the university. The biggest lessons is faith in humanity, the power of collaboration, the positivity of or the benefit of staying agile and staying ahead of everybody. But as I said, that for me, there's not really any really new lessons. But it's all the things that we have been talking about, it showed that in a very big way. I was filled with hope for the new India, that we are privileged to educate and empower. So our focus has to be to lead from the front and not play catch up. And I say this with a lot of sincerity. We need to combine the priorities of abstract knowledge generations and excellence, which is traditional Indian university, right? We have to combine abstract knowledge generation and excellence in that to relevant or contextual research. contributions of science, research, and innovation system that will need to be linked to kind of an inclusive economic agenda. I saw that too very clearly coming up. And then the very definition of assessment of educational quality and excellence, that also needed reimagination, and I saw that crumbling down. So we as educators can take the leap to think big and not be averse to risks. Then the future of our next generation looks challenging but bright with them. So the focus needs to be on faculty as mentors, because everything is changing so fast and everything is so ambiguous. The lead has to be from the faculty. With what I talked about is there has to be a mission, there has to be a vision, and that's something often missing in Indian university. In the private sector, particularly where I am, I'm very proud to have that focus, because even if you have 6 strong horses driving a chariot and 6 horses pull it in 6 different directions, you actually don't reach anywhere. So my time, the universities did not reach anywhere. Faculty dominated universities without any vision. I think that has to change. We need to reach somewhere. And just for your next talk, we have talked for an hour. And for that, you have to have an overall umbrella. And you need strong horses to all focus on that one target. The path is also important, not just the destination. So,
absolutely. And it's like you said in the very beginning, what is the point of higher education? And I think we've kind of come to a nice conclusion where it's like, working, we need to be moving forward. We need to be very inclusive. And we need to not just like we all have our own vision, we all have our own mission, and we need to get there with the right faculty and the right mentors in place. I hope I got most of your point. There are a lot of things that covered, a lot of excellent points made, but I hope I summarized it to the best of my ability here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Vasudha. Yeah. It's been lovely talking to you.
It's been lovely speaking to you too. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh, for joining us today on BW Wednesday Wisdom on BW Education. And if anyone wants to go back and watch this, it's going to be on our YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook pages. And I'm sure you can also find it on Twitter. And of course, if you have any questions, you can join us again next week. We're going to have another speaker here, same time, same place. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you. Thank you.